Good afternoon, everybody. Before I begin, I have 2 points to introduce a share with. Point number one, in general, when I give a shir, I try to create a certain excitement about something in the Torah, something to do, a certain eagerness. I have to tell you today, that's not my point, because unfortunately, we're speaking about Tisha B'Av. I have to tell you, if the one day a year I do not look forward to is Tisha B'Av, but it's definitely part of our calendar and our Masorah. And I think that it's very important to understand how we're supposed to feel on Tisha B'Av in order to get the most out of it, so at least after Tisha B'Av, we'll feel good about ourselves. The second point, the title of the shir, is definitely somewhat counterintuitive. As a matter of fact, someone said to me, it's out of order. It says foreboding, devastation, destruction, and redemption. Really, destruction should precede devastation. That's true. However, what I'm speaking about is experiencing foreboding, experiencing devastation, experiencing destruction, and experiencing, Mirz Hashem, the redemption. Now, in my house, growing up, well, first let me begin with the first source number one. Source number one is from the Rav's Torah on keynote. And this can be found in the keynote itself or in his book explaining the keynote. And the Rav points out that obviously what we're doing right now is what is referred to as Navelut Yishana. That we're mourning over something that happened 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. It's a mourning that unfortunately we experience year in and year out, and a mourning experiencing and remembering something that we lost so many years ago. And then we have what's called an Avelut Chadashah, a new mourning that we've experienced when we lose a relative, be it parents, be it siblings, children, spouses. That's called an Avelut Chadashah. And the Rav points out that even though there are many similarities, the Avelut Yishana in its essence is different than Avelut Yishana. Why? Because in Avelut Chadashah, we feel the strongest sense of mourning the time of death and immediately after death. And whether we're speaking about for one relative or a parent, that as we get closer to the end of the mourning, the feeling sort of ebbs away. And it's sort of a natural process. The strongest form of mourning to the weakest form of mourning. However, when it comes to the Avelut Yishana of the 3 weeks, the 9 days, Shavuos, Shechal Bo, Tisha B'Av, Erev Tisha B'Av itself, it's just the opposite. Because we begin with the 3 weeks, which the Rav implies that's mourning. I wanna basically maybe point out that my father maybe felt a little differently, but certainly the 9 days, according to our custom, Shavuos Shechal Bo, the week of Tisha B'Av, the mourning is a little more severe. Erev Tisha B'Av, which we will, in general, we probably will not have in its more complete form this year, is more severe, and then Tisha B'Av itself. Then all of a sudden, as soon as Tisha B'Av ends, especially this year, okay, so we'll have Milchik Shmotzi Tisha B'Av, Sunday night. But it's over, and Monday morning, you don't even feel like it was Tisha B'Av. You don't feel. As a matter of fact, I always say that in Eretz Yisrael, so different than Chutz La'aretz, I'd like to say after Tisha B'Av and Rosh Chodesh Elul, it's a Lebedik. It's Lebedik in this country. You go to the north, it's like it's a party. And all over. As a matter of fact, I hear what people always say, Baruch Hashem, that people feel like they can serve HaKadosh Baruch in Chutz La'aretz. And they say, besides the mitzvah of Yishuv Haaretz, they're wrong. 100% wrong. Besides the mitzvah of Yishuv Haaretz, why should we move to Eretz Yisrael? Okay, that's what they say. So the bottom line is that obviously they're wrong. They don't understand and appreciate what Eretz Yisrael is. And one answer is, you might be able to do mitzvos, but you don't feel what it means to be a Jew. Eretz Yisrael, there's no question between the night after Tisha B'Av and Rosh Chodesh Elul, you feel the nechama. You don't feel it in America. I spent many years in America between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Chodesh Elul. You don't feel it. But the point my uncle was making is you go from the most severe form of mourning, at least according to halacha, and this year especially, to all of a sudden going into simcha to nechama. And we really have to understand why that is. And why was the mourning based this way? And obviously it's in order to help us feel the nechama, and the point of the shir is to understand that. So let's begin with a few questions. So we know that we're in the 9 days. According to Minhag Ashkenaz, during the 9 days we don't eat meat, we don't drink wine, and in source number 2, and amongst Minhag Svar, there are various minhagim. But in source number 2, we have the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman, Tav Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Yud, discusses that even though the minhag is not to drink wine, it says Umutter Lishtos Yayin V'Havdalah Ubirkas Hamazon. The days when they were accustomed to always benching alakos, so you're allowed to drink wine, and you're always allowed to when you benched on the coast and you made Havdalah, you're allowed to drink the wine. Ramah says B'noagin lahachmir. Our minhag is to be machmir, shelo lishtos yayin birkas hamazon l'Havdalah, not to drink wine and kos birkas hamazon. General today, as far as kos birkas hamazon is concerned, general we don't usually bench alakos, so this heter would not apply even according to the Machaber. Below b'Havdalah and not b'Havdalah. Elanostin latinok, if you make Havdalah on wine or grapes, you should give it to a tinok. And the Vilna Gaon argues, you see, machin like a tinok mutter ba'atzmo. So the Vilna Gaon in source number 3 explains the Machaber. It says very simply, yes, the Jews were makabel a minhag Ashkenazim not to drink wine during Shavuot Shechal Tisha B'Av during the 9 days, but we were never makabel not to drink wine at a time of a mitzvah. And since Havdalah is a mitzvah, we were not makabel. He says, and then he points out that we were not makabel, and that's the sheet of the Gra. I'll just point out parenthetically, my father held that. He said that this chumrah, the Ramah, he felt, well, based on the Gra, he felt that someone who always makes Havdalah on wine or grape juice would be able to make Havdalah on wine or grape juice during the 9 days and drink the wine or grape juice. Someone who midei pam once in a while will make grape juice and chamar and bedina, then during the 9 days he should also make Havdalah on chamar and bedina. My father every so often would make Havdalah on hot tea. That was his enjoyment. So therefore, he said, for myself, I will not. But he says, in general, if you do, like the Gra, you'd be allowed to make Havdalah on wine or grape juice. But that's the shita of that's Machlokas Machaber Ramah. So. Yeah, drink hot tea. I forgot what he did. He would drink. I forgot exactly. But he definitely made Havdalah on tea. Okay. Not on beer. No, my father did not make Havdalah on beer. Okay, not for any halachic reasons. All right, so the Magen Avram in source number 4. So he says you give it to a tinok. So it's mash. When you give it to a tinok, that seems to imply that you're allowed to give a tinok, a child, wine and meat, grape juice and meat during the 9 days. So he says mashma de mutter litain latinok basar v'yayin b'shabazu. Why the mikara lo nagu isser lahachmer betinok? Then he goes on. B'dafka betinok she'ena yodei lisa'abel al Yerushalayim. It only applies to a child who does not understand what it means, or does not understand the whole concept of the 9 days to be Abel. However, and then he goes on and says, you shouldn't say because the mitzvah it's mutter. No, we don't say that. He says the halacha is that you're allowed to give it to a child who understands what Shabbos is and knows that every week we make Havdalah, but doesn't understand what's going on with the 9 days. So according to the Magen Avram, seems to imply that we are mechanech the children in regard to some of the mourning practices in regard to the 9 days. My daughter called me today. My 10-year-old, she spent the night with 2 of her friends from school. And it happens that 2 of her friends are Sephardim. And she called her, she says to me, Abba, she says, they're going swimming in the pool. Can I go swimming in the pool? So I said to her, I said, the truth is that the minhag of Ashkenazim is not to go. You shouldn't go, and I think her friends, because of that, they did something else. But according to Magen Avram, and my impression is this is the minhag of Klal Yisrael, at least the way I was raised, that we are mechanech children in the nihugim, the avelis of the 9 days. However, so that being said, we have to ask a question. Why? If you look at source number 5 in regard to the halacha of fasting on the Arbet Somos, so in source number 5, the Shulchan Aruch says, Tzivin Tov Kuf Nun, Hakol Chayovim Lisanos Arbet Somos Halalu. Everyone is obligated to fast these 4 fast days, and the Shulchan Aruch adds in V'Asr Lifrotz Geder. A person shouldn't say, oh, you know what? You know the sugya. It's really a minhag. It's not that important. I don't have to fast on Shivasar B'Tammuz. It's not a major fast. It's only a minor fast. So Shulchan Aruch says, V'Asr Lifrotz Geder. If you don't have a heter because of health reasons, it's asr to be paritz geder, to break the fence, and you have to fast. You look at the Bir Halacha in source number 5. Tinokes bas yudgei shanim v'yom echad, v'tinok ben yud gimel shanim v'yom echad chayavim lisanos. A girl who's 12 years old in one day, and a boy who's 13 years old in one day. It means 13. Chayavim lisanos v'lo kodem l'chein. The Bir Halacha is very clear. There's no obligation for a katan or a katana, a minor male or female, to fast on any of the fast days, besides maybe Yom Kippur. When it comes to Yom Kippur, so then the Shulchan Aruch does mention the idea of chinuch for somebody who is strong, 11 years old, for both to fast a whole day for both the boy and the girl, and if the boy is not so strong, he can start at 12, but there's definitely halach, and that's the first time in Shulchan Aruch chinuch is mentioned in regards to fasting. So it's obvious from the Shulchan Aruch that there is no obligation at all, and there is no chinuch when it comes to the other fast days. I have to tell you, I remember, when I was growing up, it was very clear in my house. No child fasts except for Yom Kippur. When I was 11 years old, my father asked me if I wanted to fast Yom Kippur. I fasted a full day. The other fast days, I did not fast. My bar mitzvah was Erev Yom Kippur. I did not fast Tzom Gedalia. I was not allowed to fast. And I remember the whole class, everyone fasted who were bar mitzvah. Only one boy didn't fast, the son of a Baron Soloveitchik. He didn't know what was going on. That was the halacha. And I mentioned there's this thing which goes around that you're supposed to fast 3 fast days before your bar mitzvah. I heard B'Shem Rav Shechter, he says that's one of the things nobody knows a mucker for. That's the bottom line. Okay, whatever, I'm not here to go ahead and to question people do. This is halacha, but where am I headed with this? It's very important for the shir. So he says, you look at source number 6 in regard to Tisha B'Av, I think, maybe in regard to other fast days, the Magen Avram does add in Kasav, this is Ramah Mipano, source number 6, the Katanim. So what do you feed your children on Tisha B'Av? Machil no son lechem v'mayim l'savol metzibur. So you feed them water, bread and water. It doesn't mean bread and water. Okay, your child comes into Tisha B'Av. What can he eat? Can I have Rice Krispies? No, bread and water, that's it. It doesn't mean bread and water. It just means, there are no treats on Tisha B'Av. I remember once, I guess I was a kid, and I was eating on Tisha B'Av, obviously, and, they had bought something special for Motzi Tisha B'Av. Maybe it was cookies, and I asked my mom, can I have cookies? She said, no, you can have tonight. You can't have cookies today. I remember, that's it. Why? Because you have to go ahead in some sense, and you have to experience the morning. So, and this is based on a Ramah Mipano. He talks about Yom Kippur, and he says Yisrael Kedoshim Heim, the Yisrael are holy, and someone who wants to do like Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, it's not our sugya, let their child fast on Yom Kippur. So he says, and you watch over them, make sure they can handle the fast, very important. So he says, V'kovi Hashem yachlifo koach, but that's only by Yom Kippur. It's very interesting. Ubashkocha matmedas. You have to keep watching them to make sure. V'shlo yehei tzadik harbe. Al b'sharat somos. And he says, and even the Ketanim, whatever that means, they should misabel. He says, with the tzibur, and as far as fasting the rest of the day, this is enough for this chinuch until you get older, or by the time they get older, it'll be l'sos and l'simcha. Now, why is this important? Because he's teaching us why is it that children don't fast other fast days. Because the whole reason to fast other fast days is for chinuch. So I'm going to be mechanech, my 10-year-old, I have a 12-year-old, about to be a mitzvah, Mitzvah Hashem, another 3 weeks, and say, the fast Tisha B'Av, it's chinuch. They can have a very good kash. What kind of chinuch is there? Maybe by the time I become bar mitzvah or bas mitzvah, Mashiach will be here. So that's what Marami Pano says. So when they either will be l'sasim l'simcha, or when they get older, there's no chinuch. Why? Because when they get older, hopefully, there won't be a fast day. And I heard a story, the same story, that once one of Moshe Feinstein's grandchildren was fasting. And he said, Zeddy, I'm fasting. And Rav Moshe gave a look. He wasn't very happy. And his daughter-in-law says, chinuch. And Rav Moshe says, there's no chinuch, because maybe there will be a Beis Mikdash when they become bar mitzvah. So my question I want to ask is, if that's the case, how come when it comes to eating the fleishiks, we are mechanech ketanim? That's the question. Why are mechanech ketanim? See, after all, maybe they should not have to keep any of the avelos in the 9 days, because Mitzvah Hashem, when the time Mashiach comes, they become gedolim. They won't have to observe the Nehugim in the 9 days. So why do we do that? That's one question, which I'll come back to. Now, in source number 8, so if you look in Chazal to see, how the Chazal saw the 3 weeks and the 9 days. So the truth is that Chazal, they had a different perspective of the 3 weeks than we did. Chazal did not necessarily say that a morning of the morning of the 3 weeks is the morning of the 3 weeks is the same morning that we have. According to Chazal, it seems that there's 2 points, there's 2 types of mourning that we have during the 3 weeks. One type of mourning during the 3 weeks is the mourning of, it's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch that a person should be very careful not to go out during a certain time of the day, during the, if you look at source number 12, I'm sorry, it's out of order, but Sarach Lizor Miyuzayim B'Tamuz Tespa of Shloleilach Yichidi Midalat Shos Ted Shos. A person should not go out from 4 to 9 hours in the daytime, from Shivas B'Tamuz till the 9th of Av. Why? Mishum Shebehem Ketev Meriri Sholet. There's a certain shade that's Sholet then, and therefore you should be very careful. And also, the Lo Yakol Talmidim, the Rabbeim should not hit their students during this time. So the second part is not really relevant to us anymore, Baruch Hashem. However, the first part is relevant. So I'm a brisker, I'm a Soloveitchik, and we don't necessarily believe that there are shadim. The Rambam in general did not mention shadim. I have to tell you that all the years I spent in camp, and I would go jogging outside camp, I never went during those 3 weeks and those hours. I was very makbid, because I don't know where Ketev Meriri is. But if he's anywhere, he's out in the mountains when no one's around. So that's one thing which is mentioned in the Medrash, one idea. And the second is the idea of the Shlosha de Pernusa, the 3 Haftorahs that we read from Shivas B'Tamuz Tisha B'Av, and of course the Zayin and Nehemiah, the 3 Haftorahs is mentioned in the Psikta of Rav Zutra. So those are the 3 ideas, and obviously from the Haftorahs, as we'll see, we can understand what we're supposed to feel during the 3 weeks and the 9 days in Shavuot Shechalbo, and Mitzvah Hashem will try to understand that in a few years. That's the second. What are we supposed to feel? But if you look at source number 8, so source number 8 did not happen this year. Barosh Chodeshav Shecholios B'Shabbos, so almost if Rosh Chodeshav falls out on Shabbos, Maftirin, you read the Haftorah, Chodsheichem Moadechem Sona Nafshi Hayu Laila Torach. You read the Haftorah that your months and your holidays I hated, it was a burden to me, and the reason being because that means Rosh Chodesh. That's the Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon. That's part of the Haftorah, and it's Rosh Chodesh. And we're saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not like the way you commemorate Rosh Chodesh, but that's what the Gemara says. This year did not happen. So the Tosfos, Masechus Megillah, source number 9, points out very simply. He says, why is it that we don't do that? But in source number 9, Daf Lamed Aleph Membeis Masechus Megillah, Ve'ein anu osin kain. We don't do that. We don't read that Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon, of Yeshayahu Perek Aleph, that God hates the way we celebrate Rosh Chodesh. Elam Maftir B'Miyahu, but we read from Yirmiyahu Perek Bet, Shimu Devar Hashem. Ub'Shabbos shelifnei Tisha B'Av, and when do we read at least the whole Haftorah then? Chazon Yeshayahu, the Haftorah of Chazon Yeshayahu. V'hatam, and the reason why we read Chazon Yeshayahu, lefish anu nogin al pi hafsikta. We're knowing according to the Psikta, Lomar Gimel de Pernusa, to recite the 3 Haftorahs of Pernusa, Kodem Tisha B'Av, before Tisha B'Av. And then we can skip a few lines because this deals with the Zayin de Nechemta. And the question is why, and this is very important. This is very important. And he says the reason is because when we read Shabbos Chazon, if you look at the 3rd line of source number 9, she'ein anu maftirun chazon b'Shabbos zechol b'Rosh Hashanah Av, he says because we hold al pidin. Okay? In other words, our minhag is to have avelis, but al pidin, according to the din of the Gemara, ein avelis chal ela b'shavua shachal tisha b'av yos b'sochel. Medina de Gemara, when does the morning start? The morning starts in Shvuah Shechal Tisha B'Av. Chazon Yeshayahu was about morning, as we'll see. It's about Avelis. And therefore, we can't read Chazon Yeshayahu and Rosh Chodesh Av, because the morning, according to the Gemara, does not begin from there. Again, we begin our morning from Rosh Chodesh. That's the custom. When the custom, I don't know. But the Gemara, in the time of the Gemara, so obviously the custom, at least the Gemara does not mention that custom. He says, and then Rav, who says that you have a Haftorah of Shabbos Chazon on Rosh Chodesh, that's because he says the Avelis, the morning begins from Rosh Chodesh Av. So what do we see from here? We see from here that the morning begins from Rosh Chodesh Av, from Shvuah Shechal Bo. According to the custom of Ashkenazim, the morning begins from Rosh Chodesh Av. So we have to understand what the morning is and the difference between what the morning implies. Okay, and then I just would like to one more point, and then I'll put all the whole shir together. So the Gemara Maseches Megillah Tavlam Alham Beis asks, what kriya do you read on Tisha B'Av? And the Gemara says, I'm sorry, Tisha B'Av Gufei, what's the Haftorah, which we don't follow? He said, Amarav Eichoisa Lezona. We read from the Yeshayahu Perek Aleph, which we do on Shabbos Chazon. Nikra Mai, what kriya do we read on Tisha B'Av? So Acherim Omrim. So one opinion says, he says, B'imlo Sishmuli, if you don't listen to me. Okay. Rav Nosson Bar Yosef Amar, Ad Onay Atzuni Amazev, V'yesh Omrim, Ad Masaleda Hazos. And then Abaye says, our custom today is to read Kisolid Banu of Nevanim, when you have children in the land and grandchildren, and you sin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to punish you, and there's going to be a catastrophe. That's our custom. So the Riva Von in source number 11 points out something fascinating. He says, I don't understand, he says. You know, Yom Kippur, we read about the Avodas Yom Kippurim, the service of Yom Kippur, of the Kohen Gadol and the Beis HaMikdash. Sukkot, we read about Sukkot. Shminat Tzeres, okay, we read Zos HaBracha, that's an exception. Pesach, we read about Yetzias Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. The 7th day, we read about Kriyas Yamsuf. And Shavuos, we read about Matan Torah, Kabbalah HaTorah. On Purim, we read about Amalek. He says, Tisha B'Av, it's clear. What happened, Tisha B'Av? When did Tisha B'Av begin? It began when the Meraglim came back from Eretz Yisrael, and they said, we're never going to do it. We're going to be killed. We're going to be slaughtered. And Rivane asks the question. He says, and even though there are opinions in the Gemara itself that say, you should read Ad Yana Natsuni, Ad Maseh Le'eda, 2 parshios that deal with the Meraglim in the second and third line on the second side of the page. Ubelel Tisha B'Av Chazru, and on Tisha B'Av night they returned. V'nigzru alem Misum Midbar, and death was decreed upon the whole Dor HaMidbar, the generation who came out of Egypt. Afilu hachi no gamul likros kisolid. We also only read kisolid. We don't speak about the Meraglim. The Einonu Korim Parshas Meraglim. So what does he say? He says, he doesn't explain why. But he says, for that reason, Shivasar B'Tammuz, we also don't read about the Egel. And the question is, why don't we read about the Meraglim? That seems to make the most sense. That's talking about Tisha B'Av. So I think it's important to understand what Tisha B'Av is about and what the 3 weeks are about. I know that the 3 weeks were beyond the 3 weeks, but Yesh B'chlal Messiah Mana. So we have to also understand what the 3 weeks are about. So, and one question I asked, and that was, why is it that when it comes to when it comes to fasting, Katan and young children don't fast. And when it comes to the morning of the 9 days, yes, even children don't go swimming. There's a heter in certain camps, instructional swim. It's a very, very weak heter, I have to tell you, because usually it's not instructional. We in general, for someone who's magiya lechinuch, we don't give them meat, we don't give them wine. The question is, why is that there's chinuch when it comes to the 9 days? So in source number 13, Rav Moshe Feinstein himself says it. He says, Avol yoter mistaber she'achi of the Tisha B'Av ubein hamitzarim hu ha'ikar lechvod Beit HaMikdash. The ikar is because of the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, it's not to mourn per se, because there is no chinuch of mourning, but it's in order, besides the mourning, in order to instill within Klal Yisrael, within the adults, within the children, to realize and understand how important the Beis HaMikdash is, how important actually Eretz Yisrael is, to understand that we can't live in all of Eretz Yisrael, what a problem it is. That's the point of the mourning, the 9 days. He says, the point of 9 days, the point of the mourning is not just to mourn. The point of the mourning is to really instill within the children and adults how important the Beis HaMikdash is. How important it is to have a Beis HaMikdash. How important it is to live in Eretz Yisrael. We're not even talking about today, which is obvious. But even when Jews were living in the Golus and they felt they could never make it to Eretz Yisrael, hundreds of years ago, and let's say during time periods when things were going well in the golden ages of whatever country, think, you know what, we can do mitzvot, we can learn Torah, we're secure, we're involved. Come the 3 weeks, the 9 days, Shavuot Shechalba, we have to cry out and say, you know what, understand and realize how important Eretz Yisrael is, how important the Beis HaMikdash is. There's a pasuk in Parshas Vayigash, which has always seemed very difficult, the Rashi. Source number 14, Parshas Vayigash. Vayipol outside, when Binyamin and Yosef finally reckon, Binyamin realizes who Yosef is, and Yosef understands, Binyamin knows who he is. Vayipol outside, Binyamin Ochiv, Vayech, Binyamin Bachal Savarav. Yosef falls on Binyamin's shoulders and begins to cry. And he says, and Binyamin cried on the shoulders of Yosef. And if you would ask me about Rashi, I would say it's obvious. Why do they cry? Well, they haven't seen each other in many years. They're the closest relative they have. They're brothers. Why shouldn't they cry? And Rashi adds in very simply, why did they cry? Yosef cried on the 2 temples that were supposed to be in the Chelek of Binyamin and were destined to be destroyed. To understand, how he knew, that's beyond me. But another question. Can you imagine? You have a child is born, and our hope and our dream is this child should be zocha tarichas yom v'shanim. He should be zocha to 120 years, whatever it means. And then all of a sudden the baby's born, and one of the parents starts to cry. So why are you crying? Because in 120 years, right, this baby's going to die. Did you ever hear something so ridiculous? Ever hear? So the truth is that Rabbi Akiva, when he saw Eishes Tunis Rufus, the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, he saw her and he spat, he laughed, and he cried. The Gemara says, why did he do that? He spat because she was, at that point, she was a pagan woman. She came from Tipa Srucha, a putrid drop. And then why did he laugh? Because he saw that she was going to be miskayeres and end up actually becoming his wife. Okay, and then he cried because she was going to die. But in general, obviously there's something deeper going on there. So there's no Beis HaMikdash, there's no Mishkan. What are they crying about? And I think the point is to understand, to cry over the importance of the Beis HaMikdash, not the destruction itself, but to instill within themselves how important the Beis HaMikdash is, how important Eretz Yisrael is. That's the point of crying, and that's why we go ahead and we have the mourning, and that's something we want to instill within the children. Yes, the Beis HaMikdash is important. So why is it that there's no chinuch when it comes to fasting? Besides the fact that why should we put them in danger? As you saw, the Ramam Yipano says that by Yom Kippur you should watch them, because the reason we fast on Tisha B'Av, on other fast days, is not because of Avelis, it's because of tshuva. It's a whole different reason. So why Chazal basically said there's chinuch by Avelis and not by tshuva? I could say because it's harder, because the fasting could be dangerous maybe. But if you look at the second half of source number 15, the Rambam Hilchas Tainis Parakei Halacha Aleph, Yesh Sham Yomim Shekol Yisrael Masanim Behem. There's days where every Jew has to fast because the tzoros they had, in order la'orer lavavos, to awaken the heart, l'vtoach and darkei tshuva, to open, to realize they have to do tshuva. That's the point. So we really can't ask why is it. Why do we have more? Why is the children are chayiv in the avelis of the 9 days, but not in fasting? Because it's two different concepts, two different ideas. But the morning is so important because the morning instills how important the Beis Hamikdash and Eretz Yisrael is. Now, but the Tosfos was clear. That's only during the 9 days, like the Shavuot Shechal Bo, Tisha B'Av itself, the 9 day, but not during the 3 weeks. What are we supposed to feel during the 3 weeks? So I think I remember during the 3 weeks. So minig, at least certainly of Ashkenaz, is before the 3 weeks start. Erev the 3 weeks, you have to come home and make sure you put on all the clothes. You can't wear fresh laundry. Okay, it's hachanas. Sorry, 9 days. Sorry, hachana for the 9 days. Hachana for the 9 days. And I remember once that I guess if you don't have enough clothes, right? So you're buying clothes that don't involve a shechianu. You should buy clothes before the 9 days start. So I remember once I had to go to buy certain clothes before the 9 days. When I was a bacher, and one of my friends says to me, "Yeah, it's Erev Yontif. You have to go buy clothes." What's that about? So, source number 60. So, if you want to understand what the 9 days are about, I'm sorry, 3 weeks, we have to look at the Haftorahs. What Haftorah did Chazal choose for us to read during the 3 weeks? So, if you look at source number 16, I just took some snippets from the Haftorah. Yirmiyahu Perek Aleph. Ki hineni korei l'chol mishpachos mamlechos tzafona. I'm calling Hashem. Yirmiyahu was telling the Jewish people, I am telling the families from the royal families in the north, from Bavel, Uvou v'nosnu ish kiso pesach shar Yerushalayim v'al kochel moseh saviv v'al kol Yehuda. They'll all come and they'll lay a siege. They'll put their seats down, facing the gates of Yerushalayim. V'dibarti mishpata yosam al kol ra'asam. I will speak to you my mishpat on all the evil that you did. Asher azavuni. HaKadosh Baruch doesn't say, this happened. Be careful, because the Bavel is going to come. The second, source number 17, which is the Torah of the second week of the Gimel de Pernusa, before the 9 days start, before Shavuot Shechalva, before Shavuot Shechalva, I should say. L'chein ora rivitchem nu Hashem es bnei bneichem oriv. I'll fight with you. I'll argue with you. This is what you do to me. What's happening? It's very simple. The Jewish people were very secure. Okay, so they worshipped some Avodah Zarah. Okay, there wasn't Mishpat, but everything was going well. Jerusalem was a bustling metropolis, even though it really wasn't. And Yirmiyahu says, if you guys don't change, something bad is going to happen. Do you know what the 3 weeks are about? The 3 weeks are about taking things seriously. Not everything is a joke. That's what you have to think about. Yeah, everything is great, and Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has showered upon us so much bracha. But we have to understand that we have to take life seriously and the world seriously. And yes, things could happen. And even though we're supposed to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but there's a certain sense of fear we have to feel, and that's what we feel during the 3 weeks. And as a matter of fact, my father taught Sfiras HaOmer. And the Avelis of the 3 weeks is very similar to Sfiras HaOmer. Very similar. We don't get haircuts. We don't go ahead and we don't go to weddings, Simcha B'Reyos. A lot of other practices in the morning are not really in place. And he said, "What's the idea by Sfiras HaOmer? It seems very strange." I gave a shiur in this one's here. It's on YU Torah if anyone wants to hear it. But just very quickly, he quoted the Shibbolei Haleket. Shibbolei Haleket says, you know why there's Avelis during the Sefira? And everyone knows Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. That's another reason. He says, because the Mishnah, I think in Maseches Eidu, says that Rishoyim are nidon begehenim from Pesach until Shavuos. Right? He says, and my father asked, so what does that mean? He says, so someone passes away in Chodesh Cheshvan, you say, he gets held somewhere in a terminal and says, hold on. So my father explained that Pesach to Shavuos is a very important time. It's a time where approaching Matan Torah we have to grow. And it says people are judged for how they behaved during that time of year, because that time of year will affect the rest of the year. And that's why he says we have to have certain practices to make sure that we take things seriously. Life is not a joke. And that's why we don't necessarily have parties. And he says even going ahead and taking a haircut. He says, sometimes we take a haircut, all of a sudden, it changes how we feel we look at things. And that's, I think, the idea. The same practice during the 3 weeks. The 3 weeks is to take things seriously. Don't think that everything is to continue the way it is. And that's what Yirmiyahu Hanavi told Klal Yisrael. He says, the northern kingdoms are going to come and put their cheers here. That's the idea of the 3 weeks. That's not necessarily mourning. And what happens during the 9 days, during Shavuos Chalbo, as Rav Moshe Feinstein pointed out, that's mourning. As Tosfos in Maseches Megillah, that's mourning. Because what does the mourning mean? So the 3 weeks is foreboding. Something bad might happen. But then comes the mourning. Why do we mourn? Because there's devastation. You look around. We're in Gullus. We see what happened to us. We see what's going on. Notice the point is to realize the devastation. We see what happened. As a matter of fact, and that's why I think that maybe, and by the way, I would tell you, I'm getting shilas about the 9 days. And listen to some of the shilas. And Baruch Hashem, people ask questions. But I think when I was younger, I don't think people ask shilas like that. Why? Because there were certain things just you knew you don't do. It's the 9 days, you're mourning. How can you go ahead, at least the feeling I got, how can you go ahead and do that kind of thing? And when I was in Avelis for my parents, so as a Rav, I had to sometimes go to a bar mitzvah. And not so much to a wedding, to a chuppah, to a bar mitzvah. And I remember going to bar mitzvah once, and they wanted me to speak, and I said, what time should I come in? And they told me, so I would speak and I'd leave, because I really can't be at the bar mitzvah. And as, I always believe that time is exact, and most Jews don't, and I came here a little bit early, and there I was standing around, and I felt very uncomfortable. I felt like I don't belong here. And during the 9 days also, the same thing. When in my house, I always felt like the 9 days, wow. You really felt, it wasn't just halachas, it was the morning. Questions like, why would a person want to do certain things during the 9 days? You have to go ahead, and you have to feel the morning. And sometimes before the morning begins, we prepare for it. We know what's going to happen. If anybody had, knew that a parent was very sick, they knew the next few hours, the tira, the death would happen. So you might do certain things, let's say in terms of to make sure, prepare yourself, because you know what's going to happen. So during the end of the 3 weeks also, we get ready for the morning. We might put on some of the clothes before the 9 days begin. We might even buy certain clothes. I'll tell you a story, a tragic story, but really very beautiful. I saw this years ago. A certain mother, not sure, she was a young mother, an older mother, but she had a child who was about to become bar mitzvah. And she had 4-stage cancer. And she was hoping she would make it to the bar mitzvah. But when a person has cancer, 4-stage, they know. They feel when the end is coming. And she felt the end was coming, and she knew she wouldn't make it to the bar mitzvah. So when her son came to visit her, she said to her son, it was very difficult. I'm looking forward to bar mitzvah, but I don't think I'm going to make it. Can you do me a favor? It's in a few weeks. I'd like to hear your bar mitzvah drasha and to see how you'll look at the bar mitzvah. Can you do me a favor? Next time you come back tomorrow, dressed in your suit and a tie for the bar mitzvah, and tell me the drasha. Next day he comes in, dressed like for bar mitzvah, suit and tie, tells the whole drasha. Sure it was difficult. Sure he cried. I'm certain that she cried. Then he went home. Later that evening, one of her close friends came to visit, and she told her friend what she did. And her friend says, "How could you put your son through that?" So I'll tell you, he says, "One of my biggest fears is that he never wore the suit, and he won't be able to wear the suit at the bar mitzvah. And I wanted him to put it on in order, only a Jewish mother. I wanted to put it on, so at least he'll be able, he might not have me at the bar mitzvah, but at least he'll be able to wear his suit." It's a beautiful story. But you see a concept, and you know something's going to happen, you prepare for it. So the 3 weeks, it's foreboding. Realize, if we don't change our way, something's going to happen, and think about it. Yes, the 9 days is going to come. The 9 days are devoted to devastation. That you see, it's like you can't continue. As a matter of fact, if you look, there's a very famous Gemara in source number 18 that he says like this: Kishachar v'abayis b'shniya, when the second temple was destroyed. And it's fascinating, by the way, that why it was the second temple, not the first temple. I'll come to that. Maseches Bava Basra, the very end of the third parak. Rabu Prushim b'Yisrael. There were many people amongst the Jews that wanted to sort of, practice a certain sense of asceticism. They wanted to not be involved, to get pleasure from anything. Shelo lechol basar shel listos yayin. And Rabbi Shua attached himself to them. Yeshua said to them, "I don't understand. Why are you not eating meat? Why are you not drinking wine?" Drink meat? We should eat meat that there was that was offered in a mizbeach, and now there's no mizbeach. We should drink wine. They poured wine libations, and now it's bottle. So he says, so you shouldn't eat bread. He says, okay, it's good taina, so we can eat fruit. He says, you can't eat fruit because there are no bikurim. They didn't ask about vegetables. All right, so he says like this. And he says, you should how about water? You can't drink water because there's no water libation. They were quiet. So Yeshua says, and this is the feeling we have to have, B'ni bo'u v'omer lechem. He says, I can't tell you not to mourn. Shaloli sa'abel kol ikar. To tell you not to mourn, I can't do, because how can we not mourn? There's no Beis HaMikdash. And to mourn more than necessary, you can't, because the tzibur can't handle this. He says, do something. I talk about how you decorate your house. And then the Kolbo says, it's fascinating, the custom in source number 19, Siman Samach Beis, based on this Gemara, the custom of Asher Zal, Re'isi Noshim Yikaros, I saw precious ladies, Shem Nimnaos Me'achilas Basar Mishtiyas Yayin. Now this minhag of not eating meat and drinking wine, it began from the mothers. They're the ones who felt like, how can we drink wine? From Shiva Thomas till the 10th of Av. And he says, and that's what they received, not from their fathers, but from their mothers, Dor Achar Dor. He says, and where did it come from? The Kolbo says, because since on Shivas Tammuz the Talmud was bottled, they stopped being makar the Talmud, and also there was no wine libation, so to show how much it affected them. The Chassam Sofer in source number 20 points out that our custom to not eat meat and drink wine during the 9 days, it stems from this Gemara. He says, the bottom line is, we can't not eat fruit and drink water, obviously, but it stems from the Gemara. Why? In order to show, this is the mourning, to show how it affects us, how we need the Beis HaMikdash. That yes, without a Beis HaMikdash, we're lost. So that really is, and that really is the idea of the 9 days and the 3 weeks. 3 weeks is foreboding. We have to realize something bad might happen. Devastation, That's after. To understand, look around, and to see what happened, devastation. And that's actually the Torah of Shabbos Chazon. If you look at the second half of source number 17, these are psukim. Arzachem shemama, your land is desolate. Arechem sereifus rufos eish, your cities are burned. We're not talking about what's going to happen. This happened already. Ad maschem v'negedechem zorim ochlam otzo shmam v'kapech zorim. The land is desolate. It's been turned over. It's upside down. V'nosra Bas-Sion kesuka b'karem. Bas-Sion is left over as a sukkah in the vineyard. Ki meluna miksha k'ir netzura lulei Hashem tzvakos. HaKadosh Baruch left a little remnant. It's devastation. What's?
Eicha was given initially before the destruction, so they knew ahead of time what's going to happen.
They knew. They knew. Yes. By the way, it's also before the destruction.
I'm just saying, just amazing because by Nineveh, whatever it is, they did to show.
Right. So that's yeah, it's true. But that's the point. That's the point of Avelis. Yes, you see devastation. What's the point of Tisha B'Av? The point of Tisha B'Av is not to talk about the Avera that we did. She says, there's not to talk. The point of Tisha is talk about what's going to happen. That's why we don't read about the Meraglim. Because the point of seeing destruction. As we sit on Tisha B'Av, we have to feel the destruction. Whether it's destruction of the first temple, whether it's destruction of the second temple, whether it's destruction of Beitar, whether it's how the Jews felt and we were told you're all going to die. It's the destruction of the Golus from Spain, the burning of the Gemaras, the Crusades, the Holocaust, whatever it is. That's what you have to feel. And that's why we go from stage to stage. We start off, we begin. Why is that? It's very simple. Because, when it comes to an Avelis, I said, it's different, as my uncle pointed out, from an Avelis Chadasha, where you begin from the strongest to the weakest. You go from a very strong form of mourning to not feeling the mourning at all at the end. The reason is very simple, because when we mourn for relatives today, so we know that until Tchias HaMeisim, this is what's going to be. I remember when I was in Avelis for a year. It took me a year to realize this, because it was Yontif comes, and I want to call my parents, and I can't call my parents. It wasn't normal. It was very sad. It was very sad. And then after a year, I still wanted to call my parents. But I would say it was normal to not be normal. If I want to say that's it, it was normal not to be normal. That's what you get used to. When it comes to the Churban, we're told it can't be that way. You can never feel, hey, this is normal not to be normal. We have to go and we have to say that we want to bring it back. And that's why you have to have a different approach. That's how we start off with the weakest form, the foreboding, and then the devastation, then the destruction itself, and then you can go ahead and you could have the salvation. Source number 21, Eicha, the first parak, Eicha Yashva Vadari Ira Basiyam Haisa Kalmana. So all the Meforshim point out it doesn't say Haisa Almana, because an Almana knows this is it. Kalmana means that in Hashem, things will come back, things will return. Even before Tchias HaMeisim, we can rebuild, we can come back to Eretz Yisrael, all the Jewish people. It's very important to make the mourning extremely intense. And the process is very important. Because if you don't do the process properly, how are you going to feel the end? Last year, Tisha B'Av was not on Shabbos or Sunday. And I met someone in my building, who actually splits his time between the Golan and Ramat Beit Shemesh. It was Erev Tisha B'Av after Chatzos, and he says to me, how are you? So I'm friendly with him. I said, well, to tell you the truth, it's Tisha B'Av after Chatzos. And I felt sad. And he says to me, that's the wrong answer. I said, so what is the right answer? He says to me, the right answer is to say that it's all good because Mashiach's coming. And I thought about it. I said, why didn't I say that? I think there's a day and a half, or there's 9 days, or there's 3 weeks on certain levels, to not have that approach necessarily. Yeah, Erev Tisha B'Av Dever Chatzos, and Tisha B'Av itself, you have to feel very sad. You have to feel like our world is coming to an end. Why? Because if you don't feel that way, then you won't necessarily really feel the salvation. And it's so important to get into the depths of that feeling. He says, if you look at source number 22, I apologize, that's the Medrash Psikta Zutra actually says what I pointed out about Almana. Hoisa ka'almana sheyosheves aguma va'aguna mamtenes al baila shenir l'derech rechoka. A person waiting for her husband to come back, below Almana mamish. And that's what it says, Yisrael is not an almond, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always there for us, he's ready to come back. That's the idea. There's a very beautiful Medrash in, I think, Parshasa Beis of Eicha. It's not on the page, but the Medrash tells us that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was doresh the words Bila Hashem from Eicha in 24 ways, 24 different spins on the pasuk. And Rabbi Yochanan, who came a few generations later, he would darshan it. He would learn out 60 spins, 60 ways to explain the pasuk. So Chazal asked, does that mean that Rabbi Yochanan was greater than Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi? Medrash says no. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was samach l'chorban, and listen to what he would say. So he would cry, and then he would go ahead and he would say the kinos, and he would cry again, and he would be misnachem. And Rabbi Yochanan would just keep darshaning. Because when you cry, and you really feel sad, then you can have the nechama. And that's really the point, of Tisha B'Av, of the 3 weeks, 9 days, is to get to that point where you really can cry, you really can feel bad, and that's why the process is so important. It's so important to go ahead and to forebode devastation, destruction, and then we really can experience redemption. I began this year by saying that it's in general a different style, because usually I like to give a shir where you walk out and feel good, wow, that was great. Now I can feel good about my lulav and esrog, my sukkah, lighting the menorah, my matzah, my whatever it is, going to the Lag B'Omer bonfire. I can feel good about everything. Here, I always say is, a terrible thing to say, I don't like Tisha B'Av. Sometimes I just in front of a crowd, so it's not, I don't want to use strong terminology, but I never liked Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is my connection to Yiddishkeit. My gosh, I hate to think of what happened to me. But he says, but it has to be that way, because you really feel that way, then you'll come to the salvation to end. As it says, Kol HaMesavel Yerushalayim, Zocha V'Rov V'Nechamasa. And I think Rav Chaim Volozhiner pointed out, it doesn't say Yiske V'Yira. He says Zocha. What it means is he merits and sees. He merits and sees. And my father told over to Rav Chaim Volozhiner, he sees it right now. He told the story of Netziv. Netziv was, as my father pointed out, was the Gavalda Gabal Menagin. As a matter of fact, the tune, but Abata V'Chartanu, the old tune, Ata V'Chartanu Mikol Ho'amim, that the Netziv composed. Believe it or not, that the Netziv composed. And he davened Musaf in his shul. Every time there was a Musaf, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shavuos, Pesach, and every time he spoke, and he cried every time, except for Rosh Hashanah. That's a different drasha. Except, he says every time he discussed about building the Beis HaMikdash. And I remember someone asked my father, how could he cry? It's Yontif, it's Shabbos. He says, no, you're mistaken. When the Tzif cried, he cried tears of joy because he saw the Beis HaMikdash. And you can only see the Beis HaMikdash if you're misabel, if you're mourning. But what's the key? How do you mourn? This is the key. It's so important to get into it, to get into the feeling, to really feel it. It really is. You have to. It's not just something you do. Okay, let's move on. It's a mitzvah. If you really, and it's hard. It's difficult because we're living normal lives. We're doing things. But you really have to feel it, because if you feel it, for bonus damage destruction, then we all will experience Mirz Hashem, the feeling, as Chaim Moshe says, and the actuality, the redemption, Be'er B'Yameinu. Yeah.
Nephew is having a bris on that day. So how does that work? You said I don't know it says you're going to continue.
If you go ahead and you actually have a bris on Tisha B'Av.
Yeah.
So this year actually you should probably give it to the mother also. Is it going to be after Chatzos or before Chatzos?
He's going to do it after. You want to do it by Mincha. They want to do.
So if you do it after Chatzos, I think the father of the says Mincha.
Because I thought they can eat the suit on a fast.
No. The father's allowed to break the fast after Chatzos. After Chatzos, the father can drink, or you give it to a child.
Oh, the father. I got it to suit a mitzvah, so they don't.
No. Yeah, afterwards. My oldest nephew had his bris on a Tisha B'Av Nidcha, but it was in the morning. So no. I don't think about it. No, it wasn't. There was actually a Tisha B'Av wasn't a Nidcha. So that's why.
So what did they do?
Even though it wasn't about something happy, it was still an excellent shape.
Thank you. So he says, so they gave it. I think they gave it to the mother of the child. If you remember.
Oh, they gave it. Oh, because you got wine. Oh, that's interesting because you got wine there.
Yeah.
So he's saying a bracha still.
Yeah. So the mother can do it. So or you give it. I think, or do you give it to a child?
The baby can drink.
You give it to the child. You give it to the child. They say give it to the baby. Actually, the baby. You give it to the child. I think so. I think something like that. I think.